Imagine this: you're walking down a crowded city street, gray rain spitting against your face, the rhythm of hurried footsteps all around you. From the corner of your eye, you spot a figure slumped against a crumbling wall, a man wrapped in filthy blankets, his face hidden beneath a tangle of matted hair. Instinctively, something stirs within you. A ripple of discomfort. A pulse of guilt. A reflex, born from somewhere deep in your bones, urging you to act, to give, to care. But then, something strange happens. You pause. You remember the news reports, scams exploiting kindness. You remember the stories, the manufactured sob stories, the professional beggars. And suddenly, your compassion mutates into suspicion, twisting painfully in your chest. How could something so pure, your ability to feel another's suffering, become a weapon that makes you vulnerable? You try to walk away. Yet the guilt clings to you like a second skin, whispering, "You're cruel. You're selfish. You should have helped." This silent warfare wages inside you all day, dragging behind you like a ghost. You don't even realize it, but your mind is bleeding from 1,000 tiny cuts, doubts, guilts, fears, each expertly carved into you by the very mechanisms meant to make you human. Now, stretch this moment further. Imagine a world, our world, where your ability to feel for others is not just a virtue, but a lever. A lever for manipulation. A lever for control. A lever that others, unseen and smiling, pull at their convenience. What if every act of empathy became an entry point into your mind? What if every urge to help could be hijacked, subtly, silently, until you couldn't tell where your compassion ended and someone else's agenda began? Think about the smiles that guilt you into buying what you don't need. Think about the sob stories that corral your votes, your time, your outrage. Think about how easy it is to confuse your own conscience with someone else's cunning. We have been taught from childhood that empathy is the cornerstone of morality. That to feel deeply is to live rightly. That coldness is evil, and warmth is salvation. But what if that equation is incomplete? What if the warmth of empathy can be turned against you just as surely as a knife turned inward? Philosophers and psychologists alike have long warned us, but their cautions are buried beneath generations of feel-good platitudes. Carl Jung wrote of the shadow, the dark twin to every noble human instinct. Nietzsche spoke of pity as a sickness that weakens the spirit. Yet still, we believe unconditionally in the goodness of feeling sorry for others. But if you knew how easily your empathy could be weaponized, would you still cling to it so tightly? Would you still proudly wear your heart on your sleeve if you realized that someone, somewhere, is counting on it, banking on it, to dismantle your defenses, to steer your choices, to extract your energy? Or would you begin to wonder, is true empathy about feeling what others feel, or is it about knowing when not to? Is love unconditional, or should it be discerning? When does compassion stop being a bridge between souls and start becoming a Trojan horse? The paradox grows heavier, more suffocating the more you look at it. If you numb yourself, you lose your humanity. If you open yourself, you risk being consumed. So which is the greater betrayal, turning away from the suffering around you, or allowing yourself to be hollowed out from within? Imagine waking up one day and realizing that half of your actions, half of your deepest, most instinctive sacrifices, weren't truly yours. Imagine discovering that every time you did the right thing, you unknowingly surrendered a piece of your freedom. You would feel tricked, violated. You would rage not just at those who exploited you, but at yourself, for letting it happen. Empathy, the virtue we celebrate the loudest, could be the very thing leading you to your own undoing. But how did it come to this? How did the most beautiful of human qualities become a hidden trap? The answer lies deeper, buried beneath centuries of social conditioning, psychological wiring, and philosophical confusion, a hidden problem that most will never see until it's far too late. Let's peel back the layers. You were never taught to see the danger. You were only taught to feel it, an invisible hand on your emotions, guiding you wherever the architects of culture, authority, and manipulation wished you to go. From your earliest years, you were praised when you shared your toys, when you cried over a storybook's tragic ending, when you hugged the child left out at recess. The message was etched deep into your developing brain: feeling for others is not just good, it is essential. It is what makes you lovable. It is what makes you human. But quietly, unnoticed, a secondary lesson was injected alongside it: your goodness must be validated by others. You learned that empathy was not simply an internal compass, it was a performance. It had to be seen, rewarded, approved. Carl Jung warned us, the greater the light, the darker the shadow. In your race to become compassionate, you also became vulnerable, not just to external exploitation, but to inner distortion. You began to confuse empathy with approval, care with self-erasure, kindness with obedience. Empathy, once a bridge to understand others, slowly morphed into a chain binding you to expectations you never consented to. But why? Because empathy, in its raw, undisciplined form, is not selective. It opens the floodgates indiscriminately. It makes no distinction between the noble and the predatory. It feels the pain of the liar as keenly as the pain of the honest man. It makes you susceptible not only to truth, but to every cleverly constructed illusion of suffering. This is the hidden flaw. Arthur Schopenhauer, the philosopher of pessimism, once wrote that compassion is the foundation of morality, but even he hinted at its inherent tragedy: to feel the suffering of the world is to become hostage to it. Without discipline, without discernment, empathy becomes a puppet string. The manipulators, whether conscious or unconscious, know this. Advertisers, politicians, abusers, false prophets, they understand a primal truth: if you can hijack someone's empathy, you can control their behavior without them ever knowing it. And so, little by little, society conditions you to feel before you think. To rush to comfort, to rush to outrage, to rush to action, before asking, is this real? Is this right? Is this mine? Consider the narratives crafted around you, the tear-streaked faces on donation commercials timed perfectly to stir your guilt. The news stories engineered not for clarity, but for emotional combustion. The interpersonal gaslighter who frames themselves as the eternal victim, knowing that your empathetic nature will bind you in guilt, long after their lies unravel. Each one depends on a single truth: the more you feel without questioning, the easier you are to lead. Jean-Paul Sartre, existentialist and surgeon of uncomfortable truths, once observed, hell is other people. But hell is not merely their existence, it is the invisible obligations they place on you through empathy. The chains they wrap around your conscience under the guise of need. And deeper still, a darker possibility arises: empathy, unchecked, creates a paradox within you: you suffer with others. And yet you lose yourself to others. You become a vessel for their pain, but at what cost? Your agency. Your clarity. Your soul. Nietzsche, prophet of the will to power, would not have been surprised. He scorned pity precisely because it weakened the strong, devoured the will, and celebrated weakness as virtue. To him, excessive compassion was not noble, it was dangerous self-destruction masquerading as goodness. He would ask you now, is your empathy making you more human, or less yourself? Viktor Frankl, who endured the inhuman horror of concentration camps, emerged with a profound insight: suffering, by itself, grants no meaning. It is the choice you make in the face of suffering that defines you. Not every cry must be answered with surrender. Not every plea deserves your soul. But you were never taught that discernment is part of empathy. You were taught that to hesitate, to doubt, to question, is to be cruel. And so you feel first. You give first. You trust first. Even when the cost is invisible. Even when the damage unfolds slowly, like rot beneath polished wood. Here lies the hidden root of the problem: we have mistaken indiscriminate emotional openness for moral superiority. We have turned empathy into a compulsion, not a choice. And in doing so, we have given others, good and evil alike, the keys to our most sacred spaces. Imagine standing before two beggars. One is genuine. One is a fraud. Your empathy compels you to help, but without discernment, you are just as likely to empower deceit as to alleviate true suffering. Which is worse, to harden your heart and protect your soul, or to offer it up like a feast to those who will gorge themselves on your goodness. You were conditioned to believe that feeling was enough. It never was. Without wisdom, empathy is a blade turned inward. But few ever pause to examine this. Few are willing to confront the possibility that something so sacred could be corrupted, not by outside forces alone, but by your own unexamined instincts. And so, the trap remains, invisible, pervasive, devastating. Yet the consequences, the full depth of the price you pay for empathy unguarded, have barely begun to reveal themselves. To truly understand what is at stake, you must follow the thread even deeper. You must see the slow, silent erosion empathy can wreak upon your mind, your society, your future. The unseen consequences are not coming. They are already here. You may not notice it at first. The decay is quiet, almost elegant. It begins not with some grand collapse, but with the smallest betrayals, within yourself, within your relationships, within the vast machinery of society. Unchecked empathy, weaponized and distorted, doesn't just manipulate your decisions in isolated moments. It slowly, methodically, rewires the architecture of your identity. You start to mistrust your instincts. You second-guess your own boundaries. A stranger asks for more than you can give. A friend's crisis becomes a chronic extraction of your time and energy. A cause you once supported begins to devour your peace, yet you cannot pull away. You begin to feel that refusing anyone's pain is equivalent to committing a sin. You wonder, who am I if I stop giving? The manipulators do not need to control you overtly. They rely on cognitive biases that already live within you. The negativity bias, your brain's natural tendency to give more weight to suffering than to joy, amplifies every image of pain, every plea, every accusation of indifference. The guilt bias warps your moral compass until feeling bad becomes synonymous with being bad. The halo effect convinces you that those who suffer must automatically be virtuous, worthy, correct. And so, without a single direct command, you volunteer your life away, piece by piece. You lose hours, days, years, trapped in emotional spirals over problems you cannot solve, grievances you did not cause, needs that are not truly yours. Society applauds you for it. It canonizes your exhaustion as sainthood. It rewards your self-destruction with momentary approval, the hollow coin of the digital age. You post about the cause you're standing with, and for a few seconds, the rush of validation feels worth it. But deep down, something darker takes root, resentment. Bitterness. You feel it every time you sacrifice beyond your capacity. Every time you are guilted into silence. Every time your genuine compassion is milked dry. You are not alone. At scale, this phenomenon begins to tear at the seams of civilizations. Entire societies become drunk on performative empathy, rewarding outrage over solutions, feelings over facts. Nuance becomes a threat, moral grandstanding becomes currency. Instead of building resilient individuals, we build dependent masses, forever trapped in cycles of emotional reaction. Arthur Schopenhauer foresaw this madness when he wrote that, compassion is the basis of morality, but he did not mean unexamined compassion. He warned that empathy, if divorced from reason, could lead to a world where sentiment rules over truth, and eventually, tyranny in the name of kindness. You see it every day, policies enacted not because they solve problems, but because opposing them feels cruel. Movements that demand endless loyalty, regardless of contradictions, inconsistencies, or harm. Individuals shamed into silence, their voices crushed beneath the accusation that they lack empathy. In such a climate, critical thinking withers. Honest discourse dies. Progress halts. Because empathy, once manipulated, becomes a weapon against dissent. If you object, you are accused of heartlessness. If you ask uncomfortable questions, you are branded a monster. If you withhold your energy to protect your sanity, you are seen as defective, broken, morally lacking. And what happens when a society trains its people to feel first and think later? When emotion becomes law and guilt becomes governance? You enter an age of emotional totalitarianism. The philosopher Aldous Huxley warned that the ultimate dystopia would not arrive with jackboots and truncheons, it would come through pleasure, comfort, the illusion of caring. The new rulers would not impose suffering but manipulate your empathy, until you willingly built your own chains and called it compassion. Imagine a prison where the bars are made of your own heartstrings. Imagine a dictatorship that needs no army, because its citizens police themselves out of guilt and obligation. We are closer to this than you realize. You feel the pressure every time you hesitate to question a prevailing narrative. You feel it when you are told that your feelings of doubt or exhaustion are evidence of moral failure. You feel it when you sacrifice your own mental health, relationships, and ambitions to feed an endless, bottomless demand for emotional allegiance. You feel it, and yet you keep giving. Because the cost of resisting seems, somehow, even greater. But every act of self-betrayal accumulates. Every time you surrender your agency in the name of being good, you carve away a piece of your authentic self, until one day, you realize, you have become hollow. A being of reflexive emotions, guilt-triggered actions, performative sympathies. A ghost in the machine of other people's agendas. The unseen consequence of unchecked empathy is nothing less than the erosion of sovereignty, of individual minds, of entire cultures. And worst of all, the ones who exploit empathy the most skillfully never have your best interests at heart. Their goal is not healing, or justice, or unity. It is control. But control disguised as kindness is the most dangerous control of all. The more you give, the more they take. The more you feel, the more they shape what you are allowed to think. If you feel exhausted, fragmented, lost, it is not your fault. You have been taught to run on emotional autopilot, to believe that endless empathy equals endless virtue. But true virtue demands consciousness. It demands choice. It demands a rebellion against the chains made of your own best qualities. The time is coming when you must decide, will you continue to bleed for a system that devours your humanity in the name of empathy? Or will you awaken to a deeper, sharper, freer way of being? There is a rebellion stirring, a way out. A way to reclaim your empathy without surrendering your soul. But it will demand everything you thought you knew. Imagine this, you awaken from the trance, not with a scream, not with a grand declaration, but with a simple, searing realization, you do not owe your soul to every cry for help. You have the right, not just the right, the responsibility, to choose where your empathy flows. And in that moment, the chains you thought were forged by morality begin to fall away, clattering like dead leaves at your feet. This is the beginning of rebellion. Not a rebellion of cruelty, nor indifference. But of sovereignty. Of conscious compassion instead of compulsive sacrifice. You have been told your whole life that love must be unconditional. That compassion must be endless. That feeling for others must eclipse thinking for yourself. But what if the opposite is true? What if real love, the love that heals, the love that liberates, requires boundaries so fierce, so intelligent, that it cannot be hijacked? What if true empathy is not measured by how much you suffer for others, but by how deeply you remain rooted in your own truth while offering care? The rebellion begins by daring to ask, is this suffering mine to carry? Is this pain authentic, or manufactured? Is my giving helping, or enabling? You must become a warrior of discernment. Nietzsche would nod grimly here. He understood that strength without wisdom is destruction, just as wisdom without strength is paralysis. The new path demands both. It demands the courage to feel and the clarity to question. To gaze upon suffering, not with automatic self-sacrifice, but with a fierce, clear-eyed love that refuses to be manipulated. This is not selfishness. It is stewardship of your life force. Imagine standing before the same two beggars once again, the true and the false. You no longer throw coins blindly. You see now, the subtle cues, the incongruities, the energies that do not match the stories. You give when it is right, not when it is demanded. You help when it serves truth, not when it serves manipulation. Your empathy becomes a sword, not a leash. And as you awaken, you will find yourself walking a path once traveled by those rare, luminous souls who refuse to be consumed by the world's demands. Viktor Frankl, who survived the horror of the camps not by numbing his empathy, but by directing it toward meaning, toward hope, not toward blind despair. Socrates, who questioned the moral assumptions of his time, even when it cost him his life. Simone Weil, who spoke of the beauty of attention, not emotional reactivity, but deep, disciplined seeing, as the highest form of compassion. They all knew, feeling is not enough. Attention, discernment, choice, these are the crucibles where true empathy is forged. And so, you must rebuild yourself in their image. First, you must reclaim the sacred word no. You must learn to say no to demands that crush your spirit. No to manipulations that mask themselves in suffering. No to causes that ask for your allegiance but silence your mind. Your no is not cruelty. It is a shield that protects your yes, so that when you do give, you give with power, with presence, with truth. Second, you must reclaim your right to doubt. Question every narrative that weaponizes your emotions. Question every plea that bypasses your mind and plunges straight into your heart. Question even yourself, your own impulses to rush into the flames without knowing what you are rescuing. Skepticism is not the enemy of compassion. It is its guardian. Third, you must cultivate empathic sovereignty. Feel for others, yes. But do not drown in their seas. Observe their pain without automatically absorbing it. Care deeply, but remain rooted fiercely. Practice the discipline of selective empathy. Offer your care where it can grow something good. Withhold it where it will only feed dysfunction, lies, or destruction. This is the rebellion the manipulators fear most, a populace that cannot be guilted into obedience. Individuals who feel deeply, but choose freely. They fear you becoming someone who sees their tricks, the staged suffering, the emotional blackmail, the engineered outrage, and meets it with serene, unmovable clarity. Because once you see, you cannot unsee. Once you take back control of your empathy, their power over you shatters like glass. And here's the most startling part, as you become sovereign, your compassion does not shrink. It grows. You begin to love more truly, because you are no longer giving from guilt. You begin to help more wisely, because you no longer rush to save when saving is not what is needed. You begin to connect more authentically, because you are no longer playing a role, you are standing in truth. You become dangerous, not because you lack empathy, but because your empathy is no longer for sale. You embody what Aldous Huxley called the fully awakened mind, the mind that feels and thinks, loves and questions, gives and protects itself simultaneously. And in doing so, you step into a kind of power most people never taste, the power to love without losing yourself. The power to give without being emptied. The power to see suffering without being devoured by it. This is the rebellion. Silent. Inevitable. Glorious. But it is only the beginning. Because beyond rebellion, beyond liberation, there waits an even deeper revelation, one final, devastating truth that changes everything. Are you ready to see the world, and yourself, through new eyes? Imagine this, you stand at the edge of yourself. Everything familiar, your habits of feeling, reacting, sacrificing, lays scattered behind you like the remnants of an old skin. You have broken free. You are sovereign. But something still lingers in the air, thick and electric, a sense that there is yet one more layer to uncover. One last door to open, the door behind which the final, most unsettling truth waits. And when you dare to open it, you see, empathy was never about them. It was always about you. Empathy, unchecked and unexamined, became your mirror, reflecting back an image of someone good enough, worthy enough, safe enough to belong in a world that otherwise feels cold, chaotic, and terrifying. You weren't just trying to save others. You were trying to save yourself, from the unbearable fear of being seen as heartless. From the ancestral terror of isolation, rejection, exile. Deep inside every overextended act of compassion, every guilt-driven sacrifice, every swallowed resentment, lived a hidden plea, please see me as good. Please let me be enough. And this, is the most excruciating paradox. The very thing you thought made you selfless was, at its root, a desperate form of self-preservation. And there is no shame in this. You are human. Your need to belong, to be loved, to be valued, it runs deeper than reason. It is etched into the oldest parts of your brain, written in the blood of 1,000 generations who learned that to be cast out was death. But if you do not see it, if you do not claim it, you will forever be vulnerable to those who promise you validation in exchange for your soul. You will forever confuse guilt with goodness, pain with proof of worth, obedience with love. The final rebellion, the ultimate liberation, is not simply to set boundaries, or to guard your empathy. It is to no longer need the world's approval to know that you are good. It is to anchor your worth somewhere so deep, so immovable, that no manipulation, no guilt, no staged suffering can shake it. You are not good because you are endlessly giving. You are not good because you are endlessly feeling. You are good because you exist. Full stop. You do not need to bleed to prove your heart. You do not need to betray yourself to validate your existence. You are worthy even when you say no. You are worthy even when you doubt the story you're being fed. You are worthy even when you refuse to sacrifice your peace for a cause that does not nourish truth. You are good, even when others call you cruel for protecting your soul. And once you embody this truth, truly embody it, everything changes. You no longer rush to soothe every discomfort around you. You no longer contort yourself to fit into other people's visions of goodness. You choose where your empathy goes. You channel it like a river, powerful and precise, refusing to let it be siphoned off by every manipulative dam placed in your path. You begin to love from abundance, not from desperation. You begin to act from clarity, not from guilt. You become ungovernable, not because you reject compassion, but because you have reclaimed its source, your own sovereign self. This is the terrifying, beautiful, breathtaking truth that the world does not want you to realize. Empathy is sacred when it is sovereign. Empathy is toxic when it is tied to your need for external validation. And when you no longer need anyone's permission to feel worthy, your empathy becomes pure, clean, unstoppable. You can walk into a room full of suffering and not be consumed by it. You can offer your hand without chaining your soul. You can see manipulation for what it is, without collapsing into guilt, without questioning your right to exist on your own terms. You are not a savior. You are not a martyr. You are not a pawn in someone else's moral game. You are a sovereign being, burning with life, capable of deep compassion and unflinching discernment. And that is what true love looks like. Not blind sacrifice. Not compulsive guilt. Not the endless hemorrhaging of your spirit, but clear, fierce, wild-hearted love, love that knows where it belongs, love that honors truth even when it is inconvenient, love that refuses to become a weapon turned inward. You were never meant to be a hollow vessel for others' demands. You were meant to be a radiant force, anchored, awake, free. The final door has opened. There is no going back. You have seen what most people never dare to see, the source of your chains, and the key that was always, always in your own hand. Now, the only question that remains is this: what will you do with your freedom? Will you build a life governed by guilt, or a life lit by conscious, chosen compassion? Will you remain a puppet of others' emotions, or will you stand sovereign, loving fiercely on your own terms? Will you trade a lifetime of quiet self-betrayal for a lifetime of courageous, conscious love? The choice is yours. It always has been. And it always will be.